Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our 12th and final webinar of the 2017 NGEN Leadership Program. Joining us again is former HIT board member and trustee at the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, Helen Dorado Alessi, and her story founder and artistic director, Erica Duncan. As always, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please click on the hand-raising icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. Or conversely, you can simply type it into the question box, which I will be monitoring and can verbalize for you. I think this is especially important for today's session as the workshop really relies heavily on interactivity. And so I'll be monitoring the attendee list for anybody who would like to, make anything from a question, a comment, or of course share their writing and or story with the group. So without further ado, I will now give the floor over to Erica, and we can get started.
Yeah, so welcome back, and I'm really excited to hear everybody's comments, even if you didn't actually start to write. Just any thoughts, any ideas that people had about last time. And usually, if we were doing this in person, we would do something that we call a go-round. And we'll kind of model it with all of us just to see, which is that after any kind of writing workshop or webinar or call to action, we'll ask people what they did during the week, what sort of struck them. So Helen, maybe start.
Okay, had a very busy week, but a lot of my work is around her story and what we're doing here, as well as Long Beach Latino Civic Association. I did some writing this week, so I'm very excited about that. I have the habit of writing and then going back to a workshop and then going with the ideas and make some changes to my original draft. And then on Friday, I'll be sharing that group in at Hofstra University. So that's what I've been up to this week.
Yeah. And in terms of just, this also has been a kind of a very terrifying week, just in terms of the country, the world. I mean, in terms of the things we were talking about last time, and just the urgency of our story.
Well,
any more thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this week was extraordinarily challenging and difficult for a lot of people in this country. That President Trump had pardoned Sheriff Joe Arpaio as if he, deserved that pardon. This morning, a tweet comes out from Fox News that potentially Trump is going to get rid of DACA. So there have been a number of things this week that have been very, very upsetting. And the issue at hand is whose story is going to win out at the end. Is it going to be his story and that story of racism and ethnic cleansing, for lack of a better term, or is it going to be the story of all of us? So I think that the Her Story model and getting these stories out there, and you're writing your stories and starting to think more about, you may not write anything today or even next week, but you're already thinking about the way your story is going to play out. So I hope you're doing that thinking.
Yeah. Sean Nelson.
Well, I had a very productive, very busy week, actually. I worked for an elected official, and I was in charge of the office for the full week. I am also the president of the North Shore Hispanic Civic Association, and I had to work with them as well. And on top of that, I am the campaign manager of 2 council candidates for the city where I live. So I had to do a lot of work with them as well. So I actually had a very productive week, and I'm proud of it. But I think that what I really want to share is, and not so much my concern, but rather my frustration with how things are going. I am a DACA recipient, and if what Fox News reported earlier today is true, that means my life will change dramatically within the next couple of days. and it's not exactly a change for the positive. It will certainly complicate things. I'll be fired from my job because I can't be employed without DACA, and it's not something to look forward to. It complicates things, and it certainly does not help. In my view, unite this nation. We need to be here for each other, and work together to make the livelihood of our fellow neighbors better. And I can't imagine ending DACA would do anything to help in that regard. And so, as I sit here today and I reflect upon my week, I really wish we did not have to converse about, disappointing news.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, not just with the group here, but with all of you, would be like, how does that affect you? First of all, your desire to tell your story, you're wanting to help other people tell their stories. Does it also change things because the DACA recipients and the dreamers were able to be open about their stories? I met this morning with the teacher at one of our high schools, and she said that the young high school students, they don't really even know if they're dreamers. They're not sure, but they put their families in danger sometimes. So I'd also like to open today's discussion from all of you, like say, how does that change? I don't think it changes the urgency of our stories. It may how we tell it. Nelson, for people who are new to the webinar today, Nelson had a really very powerful image of crossing the desert and his mother being turned away and all that. But do you still feel that you will find a way to share your story, or where does it sort of put you?
I think that I owe much of my success here to that particular story, because it's the unifying thing that I think makes us uniquely American. That desire to persevere despite the odds and obtain your goal. And if I recall correctly, that day, and I don't know if I'll get to tell my story later on, but I'll elaborate on it.
It would be good to tell it again. And those of you who are listening, listen carefully, because I like to think that the stories are almost like cooking, if you want to use such a word, that even if you didn't start to write, each time you think about what we were calling those page one moments, those scenes, those images, they get clearer. So Nelson, as he talks, and we may call on a couple of people to see what you heard, tell us if you hear any more from what you remembered last time. So,
would you like me to
yeah,
begin
yeah.
now? Sure. So my page one moment begins right after we crossed the Rio Grande, and we're hiding behind a mountain of dirt, and my mother's surveying the area, and after some time she finally says, "Go," and we start running across this field. I want you to imagine, this emptiness. There was nothing to be seen around in the area. No trees, no road, just an empty field. And as we approach the horizon, I turn to my mother and I see this look of desperation on her face. And it became clear to me, that at that moment our trip may come to an end. We were approached by a U.S. patrol agent, and he did not let us pass. Now, at the time, I was 13 years old. I didn't really know any better. I was tired. I hadn't eaten in several days, and to be honest with you, I just wanted the whole thing to be done. And I can't imagine I was my mother's most pressing concern. I mean, we were traveling with my two younger sisters, one of whom was 11 years old and had been injured on the way there, and the other one who was a newborn baby. And my mother is a very courageous person to actually consider bringing my baby sister with us, but she was there with us that day. So I can't possibly ever hope to comprehend what was going through her mind at the time. But I know that I wanted to go home. I was tired. I didn't want to continue with the trip, even though we were basically at the end of it. And as I looked at the U.S. patrol agent and my mother converse, all of that changed. When I saw the tears rolling down her eyes, I became very much aware of how grave the situation we were in really was. It became clear to me that for my mother, this wasn't so much about getting into the U.S. As it was about getting her children, into the U.S., getting her children the future that she thought they deserved, allowing them to become the people that we've become today. And I can't imagine how heartbroken she must have been, and that really broke my heart. And the patrol agent was not nasty. He was rather pleasant, but he did not let us pass that day, and we had to turn back, and turn back we did. And it's been several years since that day. It's been, if I'm not wrong, 14 years since that day, and I've moved on. I'd like to believe I'm doing well in life right now. I work for an elected official. I do, community service, community activism. I'm thinking about pursuing a law degree, and the possibilities for me, they're tremendous. But I can't help but feel like somehow, in some way, a piece of me and a larger piece of my mother is still stuck there. At that border, still, stuck there without being able to come in and without being able to fully return. In a way, I can't feel like somehow we're still stuck in purgatory, and it's something to consider, because this is, in my view, our story, right? And it's not always a story that's easy to tell, but we have to tell it. We have to tell it, because if we don't tell it, then people can't possibly ever understand what we sacrificed to be here today and what we're willing to sacrifice to remain here.
So amazing. Now, just before we even go on here, just calling on all of you, did anyone hear? I mean, it's the same story that Nelson told 2 weeks ago, but it's almost like it has deeper layers now, deeper reflections. I'm just curious, like this is part of what we do in our writing workshops, is see how sometimes just being heard, being echoed, the necessity, there's so much poetry here, but maybe people, if they want to raise their hands, like what did you hear? What had really struck you?
I think the image of his mother's face in my mind has become even more real to me. And when I heard it this time, I almost felt like I was the little sister that she brought over, like how courageous to bring an infant, to cross the border, but that speaks to the desperation, right? And I'm not sure that I ever heard you say that so strongly, that more than her coming here, it was about bringing the three of you here to have the potential for your dreams and the dreams she has for you. So I hadn't really felt that deeply, that message, as I did this time.
So does anyone in our listener group have just a feeling about it? just hearing it. Let's see. So we can go on, but just sort of feel it through as you think about your own stories. How sometimes even if you don't get to write them, Nelson was much too busy this week to write it, but it's changed some. It's a much deeper, more powerful story. So again, for newcomers here, this is Nelson's younger brother. And so did you want to tell, how was it to start thinking about what you might write last time, and where did your mind go with all of it?
Actually, me and my brother were discussing this not too long ago. So about 3 years ago. So I remember I was like in the 7th grade, and I remember that I started to get kind of fed up with school. I was tired of going, especially to math class. I got tired of going to math class, and I remember one day I got so annoyed that I just walked out. I threw my books away. And I remember like the next day, my brother came rushing into our house. And he said to you, "What is wrong with you?"
You got expelled.
He was like, "What is wrong with you?" You know, everyone was like pissed at me. But I remember it was like around 12. We couldn't sleep. And this was like around January. So we went for a walk outside. And I remember my brother just talking. We went hours talking. We went, I don't know how far we went. Like we would have to drive in a car to get to how far we went walking. And I remember him just talking to me. I remember it was cold. There was snow outside. And I remember feeling cold. I remember like feeling, I was shivering, but I didn't want to go back inside. I really wanted to continue talking. So we had to take a long trip back, but throughout the whole time we were just talking to each other. It was completely dark. There was no cars, not a single car passing those like hours we walked. And by the time we got home, the doors were locked and we had no keys. So I remember here we are, two guys freezing outside with no keys. And we didn't want to call anybody because we didn't want to wake up everyone. The moment that we hear a phone ringing, they're going to wake up my baby sister, younger sister, my father who has to work. And that moment stuck with me, especially because we were outside for hours waiting until somebody opened the door. But I think that helped it stick in my mind, especially when me and my brother were discussing about how I need to focus in school if I'm planning to succeed. I need to be focused on what I want to do.
Yeah.
You were robbed that day too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We were walking, and there was this guy who came up to us, and he was asking us for money. And my brother said to me, "Listen, stand on my other side." Like he was in between. Just if anything happened, he was in the way of me and the other guy. I can't remember how much he took away, but oh my God, that was a bittersweet memory.
Erica, before we move forward, we had a possible comment or question from Laura. Laura, go ahead. You are now unmuted.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah. So my name is Laura Olivas, and I want to start by saying, first of all, thank you for sharing your story. It's so courageous. And I wanted to highlight, as I was listening, how I observed that as you told your story again, there's more details that were being revealed, such as I didn't hear in the first time, the details of the newborn and your sister being injured. And so I just wanted to say that I heard that in this second rendition of your story. And it also, I think, sharing these stories brings a lot. For me, I think there's courage and beauty, because as you, I'm sorry, I didn't get Nelson's brother's name. ¿Cómo te llamas?
Jose.
Jose. As Jose was saying, I remember when as I was trying to do this exercise and remembering when so many things happened, part of my mind didn't want to remember. Part of my mind was suppressing those stories because they were difficult, they were painful, and I just realized that we should be doing totally the contrary, right? Like not being ashamed of those stories and being courageous enough to share them. So thank you.
Did you bring your story, the one you started tonight?
I almost didn't want to say anything because I was afraid to share. I started, but I'm not completely finished after listening to Nelson's story a second time. I'm sure I don't have all the details. But as I was doing the exercise, one of the stories that came to my mind was, I remember when I was around 8 years old. My story is my realization of growing up in poverty and not knowing that we were poor, because everybody around us was poor. But the moment to me came when we used to live in an apartment complex of 30 units, and there's a lot of families in this unit. And I remember going to play with some of my friends, and two of the games, which I at that time thought they were games, but they were not really games, was walking over to a Lucky supermarket store that was next to the apartment complex where we lived, and going there after hours, after the store shut down, to go and open their dumpsters and pick food and go into the dumpsters and find out stuff that was still good and we can put in boxes. So I remember playing this so-called game at the time with my friends, and then bringing the boxes back to their home. So that was one game. And then the other game was to go into the high school, and sometimes, so there was this high school, which I later ended up attending, but they had the back of the high school had a garden, so a community garden, a student garden. And I remember jumping the fence with all my friends, thinking again, either A, we were playing, or two, we were being mischievous, haciendo travesuras, right? So we jumped the fence and go into the garden and pull the food, pull the carrots, pull the cherries. I remember eating a blackberry for the first time, not knowing it was a blackberry, but we'd pick the fruit, eat it there, and then take it with us. And so the moment came when I was invited I stuck around with my friends, and I was invited to stay for dinner in their apartment. They lived upstairs in an apartment, and I lived downstairs in number 4. And I remember staying, and dinner was comprised of all the things we had picked in the trash and the things we'd taken from the community garden. So that for me was a moment, a pivotal moment, when I realized that, oh, this is not a game. This is our meal. This is this family's meal. What's going on? So as a kid, as an 8-year-old, around that age, I didn't know what it meant, but it started raising a lot of curiosity around the way we lived, around our resources, around what we now know as food insecurity, right? So it was a pivotal moment, and I just remember that, and I cannot remember the rest of the story, but I look forward to rethinking and reliving it, and not feeling afraid and not feeling shame around that lived experience. And so that's all I have.
It's so moving. Wow. And also so important, because people don't really always dare to write about being poor. and the child's realization suddenly that they're poor. I think we work with some young people between high school and college from very poor backgrounds, and one boy wrote about how he just pushed away his best friend because his sneakers were too ragged, and he just couldn't live with those sneakers. And I think that the number of people we reach, both the people who have had that kind of experience and then the people who haven't, who can't even imagine it. I think it's such a beautiful, important story. And did you notice, as Laura told it, the images were so strong. I would be tempted, but you can say no. Even if the written version is not quite as strong or doesn't have all of the details, just so that this could be a little bit of a teaching webinar for people to hear what happens when we try to put it into writing. What times do we have more courage? What times do we have less? And I know I posted for people who are more in the New York, Long Island area. We'd love to have some of you join our training institute, but that's one of the things that we always look at. Like, what does it mean to sort of dare somebody to put it into writing? And sometimes it comes slowly. I mean, Nelson told much more than his written version, which I remember. But then the written version, when you finally get the courage, also gives you like those moments that you wouldn't even share when you're telling a story, right? Like a smell of, you know, so, and even doing this exercise, when you're modeling it, is this you were like writing it almost. It's different. So I don't know. Tell us if you don't want to, but would you be willing to share the beginning?
I'm sorry, in writing?
Did you bring it, what you started to write?
I was taking notes. It's all, yeah, it's not in written form. I could definitely share, but it's not written. It was more now, I started writing like bullet points, and then right now, as I was telling you, I took myself back to that memory.
That's why it's beautiful, really. And just so important to give dignity and to, you know, when children first realize that they're poor. I mean, it's like I've heard many such stories, but yours has a very particular, you know, it's so deep. And, you know, the images, the garbage, anyway. So does someone else have a story now? Laura broke the ice. Let's see. We can keep going, but what about this?
I'm sorry, the line is open right now, so just let me know by raising your hand, and I'll go ahead and unmute you at any time.
You don't want to keep hearing us talking. I know there are way better stories in there in computer land. So, you know, Laura talked about being courageous and brave, and I bet you Laura would tell you right now how great she feels having shared her story. I bet you she would tell you. Laura, if you're there, tell us how you're feeling.
Certainly, a side of relief. I feel pride. I feel pride of myself right now for just not feeling the shame. I was scared to do it, but it is my experience, and there is no shame in what I have lived and whom I've become as a result of that experience. So go for it, I'd say. I'm cheering on my colleagues. Come on, I did it.
Thank you, Lana. Juanita, Roberto, Susan,
Got it. Call them out. Call them out.
Anna. I have the whole list in front of me. Don't make me call on you.
Oh, Michael.
Okay, well maybe we can move forward, and if anybody feels the need to express themselves, then go ahead and,
Okay.
and I'll interject.
Now, Gigi wrote to us after the first webinar, but did you have any more thoughts, or did you want to share even what you shared with us?
Are you referring to Gigi? Gigi's not on the line right now.
Oh, okay. Let's see. We're one more person to introduce you to, and that's Amber Davis, who will get her into the picture, and who is my right-hand person in the office and programs and everything. And Amber has her own story, so before you read the story from the book about the border crossing, maybe tell them what you were thinking that you would do.
Okay, as this is Hispanics in Philanthropy, I also have another job as a Medicaid service coordinator dealing with developmentally disabled individuals. And something that strikes to me and that hits home to me is that I have often a lot of Spanish-speaking families that, they need services for their special needs child, and I always find it so hard to bridge the gap. And my page one moment is, it actually happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was facilitating a meeting between a family and a community habilitation worker, and we're trying to create a plan for their son. And me not being a Spanish-speaking individual, the community supervisor was there as well, being the translator, and you can just tell, like, the demeanor of the father. He wanted his son to learn so bad, but he didn't want him to be a landscaper, and he didn't want him to stock. And that was his main thing over and over. And he was just, in his strong Spanish tone, and just me trying to comprehend everything, and me trying to speak English to his child, and explain, try to make everything work for both the child and the family. It's very hard and difficult, but it just goes to the dreamers aspect of, everyone has a dream, and you come to America or wherever you go to live that dream. And it's important for us to really be able to show everyone that they can dream, and that they don't have to be caught in a box where, the father is thinking that all we want him to do is be a landscaper or to stock. And, we were trying to offer a college program to the child, but the father is still being taken back, saying, he wants him to learn, but he wants him to learn English. And it's just like, it's a back and forth between, both the father, me, trying to give them services. So that's my page moment, trying to live through the dreamers and, try to create these dreams and make them real life for, individuals that need it, especially special needs individuals. But I wrote a little something, so I can it's not a lot, so maybe it'll,
give everyone
a little courage to write something. It's like probably just not a couple of sentences. But how I would open up the page so you guys can understand, how to start your writing in that page one moment, and you're at the scene. This is what I wrote. Sitting in the project room, Justin said, "Stop yelling at her. You're always so negative," as he looked very frustrated because of his father's tone. He continued speaking to my coworker in a very strong tone, and I can tell he is upset and ripping into me, but I just couldn't understand. It took so much out of me to try and speak Spanish myself, but it wouldn't come out. My coworker then turns to me and says, he wants Justin to learn and write and not have a job stocking or landscaping. And that's kind of just where I ended it. But it brings you to the scene, and we're in the project department, we're having the conversation, and you unfold basically from there. And that's where I would go and develop my story in my one-page moment. And I also have other readings that I can share with you guys, so you guys can get an understanding of the writing of what we do here at Her Story.
Yeah, and before Amber shares the next one, we were part of the Raise the Age campaign, and New York is one of, or I should say was, one of 2 states in the whole country that incarcerated 16 and 17-year-olds as adults. Just last year, after 3 years of fighting, finally they passed the Raise the Age. So now the age of incarceration is 18, which still isn't wonderful, but we published a little folio edition of work from young people in the jail. And this particular, it's a long story, so Amber won't read all of it, but she's just reading a selection from towards the end of a young person who was now in jail. I really don't know why, because none of us ever would ask anybody. And this is her story of crossing the border. So we're just picking up after, days and days of coyotes, of her sister, of horrible places. So
we keep on walking in this black, dirty, stinky water. Ahead of us, there is a tunnel. As soon as I start walking into it, I notice plastic crosses, flowers, names written on the walls. The tunnel is kind of dark, and I'm getting goosebumps. Do people die in here, I ask myself? At the other side of the tunnel, at the end, I see far away the end of this water. I can't wait to get there. I'm getting closer and closer to where I really want to be, with Mommy. What's that foam on top of the water? White foam with brown stuff on top? What is this? At my right, there's a 3 to 4 foot high hill. It's pretty high. The coyote gives us the order to climb it. One of the coyotes is up there. The other one is still in the water. You go first, he says. I'm the youngest, the lightest, so I go first. I'm trying and trying to get up there. I'm digging my nails into the ground, digging and digging till I grip and try to push myself up. I feel hands holding me. The coyote is helping me, and it seems so difficult. I'm feeling so heavy. I finally get up the hill. I turn around. Now the only people in the water are my sister, the coyote, and another tall, skinny man. They're trying to help my sister to get up. We are running out of time. A lot is going through my mind. These 2 men are trying to push my sister up the hill. What can I do? I lie down on the ground and start cheering for her. Vamos, Jenny, tú puedes. Come on, Jenny, come on, you can do it. I grab her arms and try. She is so heavy, or maybe that was the moment that made it feel so crazily impossible. Between the 2 guys in the water, pushing her up, and me, she finally gets up the hill. I gasp. We are still together.
Beautiful. Yeah, and you can see, and this was written probably over a period of a couple of months. It's a quite long story. And this woman was in that particular group in Riverhead Jail. She was the only Hispanic woman. And she did write it in English. And, but these kinds of stories also were very educational. In the jail, people, the whole black-brown, divide, sometimes played out, rival gang members, but there was no way anybody could turn their heart away from this story, which is the other thing that we're hoping to say with all these stories, that nobody should be turning their heart away, and I think that as the situation gets worse and worse in our country, I think that our stories have to get all the stronger. I'm just thinking of the story of the children who are going to wake up in poverty. How many more of them there will be suddenly? And this Laura's story is really talks to that. So did this help give anyone the courage? Okay, while we're waiting, Helen also has with her a story that she's been working on for a very, very long time about her experience teaching with young people who crossed the border by themselves and recently came to this country. And,
okay. Did I hear somebody come on board or?
No, I don't know.
So this is called Josue. And I'm getting a ton of text messages, so please excuse me. What do you think it feels like to be a 15-year-old boy from Honduras, newly arrived to a Long Island high school? Can you imagine being this boy who's painfully shy and small for his age? Close your eyes and imagine that you have deep brown eyes that hardly ever look directly at anyone, but down to the floor or on your desk when you speak. And when you speak, your voice is so quiet that we barely hear you. You've been here for only 6 months, but it feels like a lifetime. Your face reveals so little, but I know there is deep emotion there. The classroom is large, and the desks and chairs are already in a circle. On the walls are educational decorations, vocabulary lists, homework assignments, and testing schedules. It's very warm, and I can hear the kids on the soccer field right outside the window. All 10 students have been working for weeks on their stories. Each week, the stories evolve as the writers push themselves to go deeply back into memory and give voice to a never-spoken personal story. There's one student that I am worried about in this class, Josue. Will he be able to open up and share his journey to the United States from Honduras? Without being overly dramatic, I feel his life may depend on it. I never know what will come out when the quiet ones share and how painful it might be, but I'm ready and I think he is too. He's never read it out loud. He doesn't trust me or maybe anyone, not even himself. There's a lot of effort that goes into trying to forget and keeping the memory of tough experiences buried. I know he's writing. I see the words on the paper, but he's super protective of what's on that page. Each time I walk past his desk, he covers the paper with his arm and puts his head down on top of it. I really feel that I must be gentle, but sure with him. This is the last day of class. If he doesn't read, he will see this as another failed experience. No regrets here, Josue. Just do your best and so will I. The students prepare to volunteer to read. This time, a usually bit of a waiting game for me. Be patient, Helen. They fidget as they look from one to the other to see who wants to read first. This is taking some time, or does it just feel that way? Because I'm impatient to hear Josue's story. We go around the circle listening to the wonderful and haunting stories that emerge from your classmates. I begin to wonder, how will you feel about yourself when you read in English and when they read in English and you can't? I remind the class that all are free to read in English or Spanish, whatever makes you more comfortable. There's enough courage needed to exposing their stories without having to worry about punctuation, pronunciation, and so forth. We can translate the stories into English together later on. As we go around the circle, we reach you. So it's now your turn to read. I'm nervous for you. And you must be too, because you say in a low voice, no quiero. Okay, Josue, sin problema, I tell you. We will come back to you later. There are 4 students left to read, and after each of them, I return to you to give you a chance to read. Andrea? Andrea reads her piece about her family celebrating the New Year in Honduras. She describes the custom of carrying the family's favorite piece of luggage around the outside of her house to illustrate another year's passing. She tells it with such heart. It's really beautiful and makes me think, did she use that same maleta for her journey to the United States? The whole family is part of this yearly ritual. They laugh and sing as abuelas, abuelos, tías, primos, all holding hands, thanking God for the past year and praying for a good new year. As she finishes her story, the students seem lost in their own memories of family customs of their own towns in Central and South America. I asked Josue to read, but I'm not surprised that he's not ready. I call on the next student, Luis. ¿Estás listo? Luis straightens up in his chair, fidgets with his papers. Luis shares his piece on life in El Salvador. My name is Luis. I had to leave my country or I was going to be killed, he said. The gang was after me to join. I was so scared, and my mother feared for my life. They wanted me to sell drugs, and they chased me in school, never letting up, never leaving me alone. It was a nightmare that I could not wake up from, no matter how hard I tried. The teachers knew what was happening. It was happening all over the school. I stopped going to school, but they hunted me. And one day, when I got back from the store, they were waiting for me in the living room. They were angry and agitated. They knocked things down and broke my mom's little cat figurines and some plates. The biggest one took out a gun and put it next to my head. You join or you die right now. That's when I knew. I knew I had to run far away. Luis's voice trails off. He's no longer in the classroom in Mineola, New York. His mind is back there in the moment of desperation. There was silence. I look around the room at the other students' faces. They were engrossed in Luis's story. He had done a very good job of helping us feel the drama of the scene. I tell him exactly that. I do not want him to stay too long in that time and place of fear. Next student to read is Jonathan. His voice is scratchy and very low. I have to tell him several times to raise his voice. But his sad story is so full of emotion that he breaks down several times in tears. He reads his story about seeing his father for the first time in many years. He describes the awkwardness, the strangeness of hugging a stranger, and then the joy of finally being with his dad in a loving embrace. Some of the other students pat him on the back or walk over to him and give him a hug. Compassion and empathy, understanding are in the room hovering over this class. The students all clap when he comes to the end of the story. They all know it's been a struggle. We all have read except for Josue. I look over to Josue. He waves me off. Josue, I can tell he wants to try, but he lacks the energy, or is it fear I see in his eyes? I'm not here to get you to do assignments to help you pass your classes, but I am here to see if together we can make something magical happen. Josue, tell me your story, please. What was it like in Honduras for you and su familia? No. I move closer to him, put my hand on his shoulder and say in Spanish softly, Es su turno. Josue, tú lo puedes hacer. The drama has been building in the room, so all eyes are on him. And you look up at me. I can see you trying to work up the courage to speak, and finally you begin to read. You're reading out loud. This is huge. I'm elated. Then I hear it. Josue, you can read that in English. No. Miss Batson, his well-meaning ENL teacher has no idea what she has done. I have to snap Josue back into his reading. I stand close to Josue and gently whisper, Sigue en español, por favor. Es el idioma de nuestros antepasados orgullosos. Thank God you managed to compose yourself and draw up your courage again. You read your story and I can see it happening, the tears falling down your cheeks. You wipe them away quickly with your sleeve, but you don't stop. That's it, Josue. Get it all out. I feel transported by his words to a tiny village in Central America where he discovers that he will be leaving soon, leaving for the United States on a dangerous trip with many obstacles awaiting him. He walks through his small home and stares at his things and his relatives as if somehow to memorize them, packing them in a suitcase of his mind and bringing them with him. You finish, there's a hush, and then enormous applause breaks out in the room. The kids are all on your side. They know exactly what you're talking about. I look over to my sister, your science teacher. We make eye contact. We are crying. We know what this is like for you, Josue. Muy bien hecho, hijo. Well done, son. Well done.
That's such an amazing piece. And, you know, I think often when we think of memoir, you know, you think of the personal, the private, but especially for all of you in terms of the work you're doing and for that matter, everyone in the room here. I think it's also about giving voice to other people. It's about, you know, the work that we're doing is as much who we are, and this is so deeply Helen, as well as Josue.
I think that especially as people who are in the nonprofit field or grant makers, that we are privileged to be witness to so many things, people's stories and their lives, and, you know, just thinking about what's happening in Texas and all those people running from water. And, you know, it's hard not to get wrapped up in these stories, but it's really important that we, in our positions, use this very carefully as a way to let people know what's actually happening on the ground, not to have to always depend on media or what have you. You know, you're seeing it, you've lived it. I lived Hurricane Sandy, you know, I know what it's like. So, you know, I think by being the witness and giving voice is a very important way to be an amazing nonprofit leader and grant maker.
So, any thoughts from anybody, or even for that matter, any questions?
Why don't I go ahead and I'm just going to go ahead and open it up to everybody and unmute everybody. Just try to. So give me 1 second. This time anyone can go ahead and talk.
Well, Michael, you could too if you want to just get the ball rolling, you know, about just having experienced both how we begin to evoke the stories, but also how the stories themselves work to bring people into a moment or a scene.
Yeah, and I think something else that would be helpful would be for those of you, and Gigi actually just emailed me with her sincerest apologies for not being on the call. I guess she couldn't get out of a certain meeting. Gigi had shared a really heartfelt story in the first webinar and had sent Erica and Helen an email to follow up on this. And of course, Lauda as well. And I think there was a few others from the first one as well. I would love to put you all together and keep you in contact with her story so you can continue to, you know, let your stories evolve and learn more of the pedagogy and maybe, you know, form a working group or something around this that could end in some sort of product either at HIPS conference next year or, you know, a number of online platforms where we could share these stories and you know, kind of continue this conversation that we've had.
I'm very interested, and now having started the process, I want to develop it. So gain the tools on how to develop the story to strengthen it a little more, and also how to share it. Like, can you tell us how, through what avenues you've been sharing these stories thus far?
Sure, and it varies very much, but say the stories that were written in the jail are often shared in criminology class. One of the biggest victories we had was that the corrections officers, who were completely contemptuous of women, they really didn't like the idea of addicted mothers who chose drugs over their children. But when they heard the stories and they discovered the common humanity, they actually had the jail buy a book that we put together of the women's stories, and nobody could graduate from the academy in Suffolk County to guard the women without having studied the book. That was pretty amazing. We also worked with the Workplace Project, which we met in a union hall, and it was mostly women who cooked for the day laborer community or child care people. And but we also was a bilingual group, and we also had ministers and teachers who were English speaking. And we put out a book there. And again, our county, Suffolk County, the county executive, who isn't wonderful, but he tries to make believe he's okay, had a welcoming ceremony and a press conference. And he got about 25 human service providers, the police, the firefighters, the social service, health and social service, human rights, different groups. And we had a reading circle, and we read the book, or one of the stories. One of the women came, and she had written about a factory accident in which she had cut off a finger in a very horrible broken machine, and instead of being given help, they hid her away in a room and then made her sign something. So they used this story, which was very powerfully written, as a vehicle for all the community executives and service providers to discuss, well, what was their role? What could they have done differently? So I think that the way we try to use the stories, the student stories, is in terms of making people ask those hard questions. I think one big question, and I would love feedback from any of you, because I think I wake up at 3 in the morning every day worrying about this. We do have a number of young people who cross the border by themselves, high school students, and they're incredibly powerful stories, stories that the world really needs to hear. And finally, I started to put them together in a collection of what I was calling anonymously shared stories, and said, in the words of Nancy Pelosi, when the Statue of Liberty has tears in her eyes, what happens to the voices? That's what Nelson was talking about. What happens to the voices of the people who are not safe when they share their story? What I did was use the old-fashioned redacting technique, and I said, we are publishing these or putting them up, preparing them for the web for someday when the students can claim their stories again with their own names attached. And if somebody wrote me nom de s and had 5 names, we would just black it out. And, you know, it was very strong, very heartbreaking. But I guess this is a big, big question. In a world where the stories are so badly needed and it isn't safe, how do we get them out in the world? And, you know, just any thoughts from any.
Well, I guess one thing is, you know, we need to showcase how powerful stories really are. Oftentimes, I find it that people don't really believe that. They don't really believe that their stories matter. You know, they think that it's going to enter an echoless chamber that's going to get lost. No matter is not really the case. Our stories are our most unique, and I guess you know, like truly ours, like the things that we have. And if we, you know, if we don't share that with the world, then, you know, no one else can. Only we can do it.
Yeah.
And so I think that one thing we can do is, you know, highlight how important it really is, sharing this.
Yeah.
I think also when they don't hear our stories, when others don't hear our stories, it's a lot easier to marginalize and dehumanize and detach from, you know, other people. So Joe Arpaio putting, however you pronounce his last name, I don't even want to say his name, you know, him putting Latinos in jail tents under 102-degree weather. And, you know, I've heard horrible stories about this individual, and nobody's blinking an eye about him being pardoned. So my question is to all of you, if you hear a story of one of those people who were put in that position, wouldn't you see them more as a human being than just some sort of innocuous figure? Oh, those people are not even human. Like all those people sitting in detention centers, I'm worried about all of those people and children. There's nobody watching over them. There's nobody caring about them. So, I do encourage you all to write your stories, even if you don't read them out loud to anybody. Get started. You're going to feel great. And there are a lot of places to tell these stories. The Unity Conference is coming up, right? The Council on Foundations is conferences and workshops. Maybe Michael, with HIP's help, we can do something at one of these conferences. I don't know. But, as fellows, you have the power to suggest things that you would like to see happen. So I encourage you to do that.
Yeah, I would certainly second that. And going back to what Nelson said, we see over and over somebody just so surprised that their story had any power. And, it's a wonderful moment. By now I've heard, it's 21 years that we've been doing this work, and I've heard hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of stories. Because everybody, they're just so amazingly alive. And, say, last time as I was driving home, I thought of the two stories that had been told on the webinar. Today I'll be thinking of Laura's story.
Yeah.
And you won't be thinking of it abstractly. You'll be imagining what it was like to be that child who thought she was playing a game. And one way that you can test the power of your own stories is almost how much do you remember of the details. Like even on this webinar, people remembered new details that Nelson put in for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So when Amber tells her story a second time, we'll hear even more. So I'm hoping that some of you will be interested in forming a work group, and that could be smaller, more intimate. It wouldn't be quite as frightening. There is something about, and especially when you can't see faces.
Yeah.
One of the things I always do when I'm teaching a new group, whether it's at the jail or in the school or in the Lady Hall, I make sure everybody is in a circle so they can see each other's faces. It's pretty terrifying to talk to, sort of not know the expression, not know what's happening to your story. So I don't know, Michael, did you want to say a few more words about possible next steps?
Yeah. First off, I think that's a terrific idea, and I'd be more than willing to provide HIP's GoToMeeting instead of GoToWebinar, which is more of an interactive platform than a didactic, such as this one, where everybody, we can get a small group together and have everybody use their webcam so that we can kind of mimic an in-person workshop that you guys put on, and kind of facilitate that and just open up the floor and give you the space to share your stories and share the process of writing those stories, utilizing the pedagogy of her story, as well as put them in touch with you as well, so you can continue the dialogue throughout the year. So I will definitely send out an email to the group for those who are interested, and we can go ahead and follow up and move forward with that.
That's very exciting. And again, for anybody who's interested in learning this pedagogy and taking it into your own workplace, or we're starting actually September 11th, a 13-week course at Hofstra with 4 universities involved, but also a lot of community members who are looking at new ways to teach for peace and justice. Right now, Hofstra is offering it to the community completely free of charge. And the only real give back is in the spring semester, supervised field placements. And last spring, we started a new group at Westbury High School and LIU Post. We started a group on gun violence in Long Beach. We started a group for incarcerated teen girls at Rikers. And so the Institute participants got a wonderful chance to do this. And one or two of them are now teaching for us. So.
Helen, any closing thoughts?
I wish you all the very, very best. I think you're so fortunate to have been selected as a Hispanics in Philanthropy Fellow. I hope you know what a privilege it is. There are a lot of leaders out there who are depending on you. I don't want to make it like this awesome responsibility, but you know, you've been given a lot, and I hope that you find this series of webinars that we've just done helpful to you, not only, you know, professionally, but also personally. Please feel free to contact Erica, myself, and if you want to follow the fan club here of Nelson, Jose, and Amber, please feel free to reach out. We're a friendly bunch.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much again, Erica, Helen, Nelson, Jose, and Amber, for your time and for being candid and open to sharing these really powerful stories that you've crafted over time. And I hope that we see some of this in some of the HIP fellows, because, you know, I believe each and every one of them has a powerful story, at least one powerful story within them. And we would love to kind of coax that and help share that story, those stories with everyone. So again, thank you all for your time. Thank you all on the phone for your time. And look out for a follow-up email with the recording of this session, as well as the information on a possible work group coming out of this. So Erica, any final thoughts?
Just so it's been really, really wonderful to work with all of you. And I'm looking forward to, you know, getting stories bit by bit. I should say to you that one thing about her story is it's not like people get an assignment, write this much for next week. It may be that somebody a year and a half from now, suddenly you'll be inspired and start your journey. We've had people who came to a workshop 10 years ago, and all of a sudden they're back now. So I'm hoping to see and hear from all of you. Yeah.
Gracias.
Gracias,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a great Labor Day. Bye-bye.
Okay, cuídense.
Yeah.